Okay, smile.
You gotta hold it for 10 seconds.
Hello and welcome to LinkedIn Live, your Sales SOS podcast. And I'm Liz Hyman. We're here with Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, and Renee Bigelow.
Hi.
We are here to solve your sales problems. Here's what we're going to talk about today. So we have 4 sections, and we're going to start by talking about, guess what? It's Q4. What are we going to do? And then we're going to talk about what are the worst mistakes that companies make during Q4 and how do we avoid the Q4 scramble? And then we're going to have a little fun and talk about creepy salespeople, since it's Halloween, creepy, spooky things that salespeople do. So stick with us. We're going to break this up into 4 sections because we're going to turn this into 4 podcasts. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the first podcast. I'm going to introduce the crew again. Hi, I'm Liz Hyman, and this is your Sales SOS podcast. I am here with Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, Renee Bigelow.
Hi.
And myself. And we are here to talk to you about the Q4 scramble. I can't believe it's already Q4, you guys. Can you believe it's October?
Yeah, I can't believe it's the 21st century. So
yeah, it creeps up on you so fast. So here we are. It's Q4. And I want to tell you, I put a poll out on LinkedIn just to kind of see what kind of answers I would get. And I said, hey, what's your Q4 looking like? Is it like a mad dash to hit your numbers? Is it close? Or we are well positioned for Q4. We got this going on. And the 20% said it's a mad dash, which was a lot lower than I expected. 80% said it's going to be close. Nobody feels like they're well positioned for Q4. What happened?
Should we answer that?
Yes, answer.
Well, I am actually surprised that only 20% said that there's not a mad dash, because we are definitely seeing slowdown in the marketplace. Everyone I talk to across all industries, they're just seeing a slowdown. But what happened in that it's not doing that? I mean, I think there are so many factors in what's going on inside of buyers. I honestly don't know that it's an economic thing, but I do think it's a head trash thing. I think there are so many people that are afraid of the unknown, whatever that unknown might be, that they're holding on tight to their wallets. So that's just what I've been seeing. I think it's really broken. I'm going to share 2 more points and then I'll pass the baton. I think AI has created a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are afraid of what's going to happen to their jobs. I live in the sales and marketing world, and so many people are fearful of AI versus embracing AI. And I think that leads to this uncertainty that creates a slowdown in the economy. And I think the last thing is people are still selling the way they've always sold instead of the way the new buyers are buying. And so that's what I see happening.
I think those are really great points, Bryn. I'll add, I think all of 2024 has felt like a story of 2 stories, sluggish and slivers. I feel like it's just been a little bit sluggish. It's not like there've been these huge pullbacks, but it's been a little bit sluggish, and that compounds over 4 into fourth quarter. It just kind of compounds. And what I'm seeing with many of my clients and also colleagues that I talk to is it's a tale of slivers, right? It's not like people are just wholesale dropping things, but they're cutting by little slivers, saving little bits everywhere they can. And that adds up. If you have a big client list and there are lots of little, it's death by a thousand cuts kind of feeling. So I feel like going into fourth quarter, that's a big story right now, is how do we, get back some of those slivers if we can.
Yeah, Chris, what are you seeing?
Well, for me, because I'm mostly focused on healthcare payers at this time of the year, this is always our slower portion of the year because you hit open enrollment, not a whole lot of things that's going to happen. What you should be leveraging this time of year for is building relationships that you're going to need when budgets get allocated come January. They may know their budgets right around now, but it's making sure you're building those relationships so you're the preferred option when they start making those types of decisions, which usually happen later in the year, beginning of next year. But I think overall, I agree with what Bryn and Renee said. You're looking at just uncertainty overall. And when there's uncertainty, I think you get inertia. So
I'm going to agree with all of the things that were said. One is, the uncertainty I think is really clear, and the uncertainty is sluggish, right? People are afraid to make a decision. They need to make a decision. They're not sure which one to make. So when you don't know what's coming, you don't make a decision. So right now, I think the biggest factor in sales is that people aren't making decisions. The decision is nothing right now.
And I think one of the things that you said there, like if you look at, like, I can't remember which book it was, but one of Anthony Iannarino's books, where he started out with buyers are looking for sellers to help them make a decision they either can't or are unwilling to make themselves.
And I think this goes back to what Bryn said about we are still selling the way we used to sell. So here it is, 2 years after COVID started, and we are still acting like we have an economy that's going like crazy, and we're allowed to sit around and wait for the sales to come in. And frankly, that's not good selling, and it never carries you through difficult times, sluggish times, recessions, anything. So now is the time, and I think this is where we start getting into what do we do? What do we do about this Q4 and needing to hit the numbers? And I think the first thing is our salespeople need to be proactive. They need to be really digging into those sales skills that make them effective. So for so many years, we had such a boom that people were buying in spite of terrible salespeople, in spite of laziness, in spite of salespeople not following up, right? So the sales were happening regardless of really poor sales behavior, and that doesn't cut it right now. And it maybe if you're in certain industries, maybe you're still, maybe if you're in the AI world, people are buying like crazy. But right now, for most people, what we're seeing is buying is a little tougher. And I think the other critical thing that has to change the way our salespeople behave is this AI thing not only creates so much noise. Bryn, how many emails did you get last month?
Me?
Yeah, do you think?
I get 300 or 400 a day.
Yeah, I got 4,000 last month just in my newsletter folder. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know about you, Chris and Renee. Are you guys okay? Now no. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I mean it's definitely crazy, right? But it's also, if you're looking at things and people are putting on automated sequences and things along those lines, it's like, are you paying attention to what your customer, what your prospect actually wants, as opposed to, oh, this is our process and I'm just gonna follow it blindly? Like that, you're a human. Like, use that, wet computer that's in between your ears a little bit.
And I don't have AI to read my email. And when AI does read my email, it's just filtering stuff out, right? So if you've just sent me a generic email, I'm never even gonna see it. So clearly, hang on one second, Bryn. Clearly, we need to think about the way our salespeople are selling. So let's really dive into, for the next 20 minutes or so, what do we do? It's Q4, and we're either not going to hit our numbers, not sure we're going to hit our numbers, are desperately trying to figure out how we're going to hit our numbers. So we need to figure out what we're going to do. Before we jump into that, Bryn, what were you going to say?
That's okay. Keep going.
What do we do, you guys? What do we do? It's Q4. Help.
So I'll tell you one thing that I'm doing with a couple of clients right now because of this story of slivers, right? We're looking at upselling accounts for Q4, right? Like, because at this point, a lot of depending on your clientele and your budget and the cost of your product, a lot of projects are just kind of in that sluggish story, right? Like, it may not close before the end of the year. That may be waiting on a new budget. They may be waiting for some uncertainty to clear out. They may be waiting on more consensus. But what is easier to close before the end of the year is gaining back some of those slivers from existing accounts. And really, and you have a history, you know more about the account, you know where they're down, you know, like, things that you can do to kind of grease those wheels and really offer the service. To your point, Liz, do a better job, right? Selling to someone you know. And that's where I feel like there's some gain for some slivers. So we're working on some upsell projects, right? And ways to reinvigorate, and whether it's a restock kind of thing, right? Because you notice that orders are down slightly, restock and offer an incentive, or it's checking in, not using the words checking in, but reconnecting with clients and seeing what they're planning, where their needs are, what's new with them. It's really amazing to me whenever we go in and really look at these things, like trade show leads that we've gotten over the year, how many are untouched, right? And by that, I mean people who are already doing some business with us, but we've kind of connected with a trade show or something like that. And we just haven't gotten to them because the frenzy of everything. But when you really zero in, there's a story to get some of those slivers back.
Can I and that?
Sure.
Because I love that. And I'm going to say, because I'm always coming from that LinkedIn perspective, it's just sort of my DNA. But go into your client accounts and search for all of the stakeholders inside of that organization that you want to meet. Have a conversation with your champion. Maybe you're in one department or one area, and say, hey, here are the 17 other people inside the company that I'd love to have a conversation with. Are you open to me just dropping your name, letting them know we're working together? Don't even ask for the introduction. We don't want to put our client to work. But if I reach out and I say, hey, Renee, Liz Hyman and I are working together in the sales department. I mentioned your name, or your name came up in our conversation, and she thought it made sense for me to reach out and introduce myself and loop you in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And when you start to have that conversation, who in my company, if this is happening in my company, I want to be looped in. I don't want to be out of the loop. Right. So when we start to have those conversations with all the other influencers or decision makers, to exactly your point, Renee, which is brilliant, how do we get in front of them without it feeling like I just want to sell you more? And it's really, I just want to talk about what we're already doing inside your company, so you're in the know. And to start those conversations. The second piece, and this is, in my opinion, preparing for the beginning of the year, is start to make a list of who else that champion knows outside of the organization that you want to meet. Once you've optimized their company, who do they know that they can introduce you to or give you permission to name drop to fill the new pipeline?
I want to build on that for just a second, because I've been working with a client, and it's this very typical thing I see, particularly in manufacturing, where we're waiting for requests for quotes. We're calling purchasing and waiting for requests for quotes. We just keep calling purchasing and waiting for requests for quotes. And now is a really good time, as the year is wrapping up, to do exactly what you're talking about, Bryn, is who else do I know in that organization? Can I be talking to the engineers? Can I be talking to the project managers? Can I be talking to some other people who might be able to put urgency or might be able to weigh things more heavily in my direction as we're making these last minute purchases? If we are just waiting for purchasing, can you get my, can you meet the qualifications? Can you get it in my timeline? Can you get me the cheapest price? That's all they really care about. And if you're waiting for them, now is a great time to reach out to the engineers and the project managers who you can say, hey, look, we support you every time. This works really well when you're working with us. How do we build more trust with you to get more of your business? And I think it's a really good time for those conversations. Chris, what do you think? And what's your team doing? Chris is in the
Well, I
trenches
think the
doing it now.
Well, I think the first thing is looking at your pipeline and understanding what has a realistic view of closing that you can say, okay, what's the odds of that happening, and being able to push those things out, because we still only have 168 hours a week, right? So if you take that out and you take the holidays and everything else that are going to impact you in Q4, you really need to make sure you're spending your time in the right places if that's where you're going to be, right? Doesn't mean you stop doing some of the basic prospecting and outreach that you would normally do, but you really need to be strategic if you're going to be focusing on hitting that number in Q4. So that's the first thing. Make sure you know where you're going to spend your time. Then I think after you have that, then you can start looking at those areas for, and part of this is going to depend on what your normal sales cycle tends to look like, but what are those things that you're going to be able to pull forward that are going to be able to hit that timeline? And then it becomes at least a predictable or understandable process that you're going to go through. And then you fill in the gaps where you have to. But that's how I tend to approach it, is more, let's figure out where we're going to spend our time. And then once you know where you're going to spend your time, then it becomes a whole lot easier to sort of allocate the open pieces of your calendar.
So I love that concept. I call it funnel triage, right? So going into the CRM, going into the pipeline funnel and triaging. This could happen. This probably isn't going to happen. Let's not focus on it. This we might be able to move up. This one we positively can't. This one's focusing on it. You know what? We've really not given the attention to this one that actually could close if we put a little effort into it, right? So this triaging is really powerful this time of year. And don't just stick to the bottom, like move up the funnel a little bit and see if there's stuff up there that maybe really should be moving down that you haven't been focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. I mean, again, that's where I think understanding what your sales cycle length is for, and ideally per phase, but at least your overall sales cycle. So, hey, if those things are at the top of my funnel, I can still pull, if they're interested in these particular offers, these are things that tend to close in that period of time, where some of these others, maybe they're going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Bryn, what were you going to say? There you go.
Yeah, I have my you are on mute mug, so have that.
Love that. I need that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just love everything that everyone is saying. The one thing I will throw in, which might go back to what we were originally talking about, is what change do we have to make? And I think there are 3 major changes that we have to make as salespeople. The first one is we have to detach from what our prospect is worth to us and attach to what we are worth to the prospect. We have to go to market with the mindset that we are here to serve and to help, and the sale will come when the time is right. When we as salespeople go out with that number on our backs, with, whatever my quota is and how far I am from my quota and how close I might be to making President's Club, when we have that in our heads, we mess up the sale. So we create what we fear the most. So the first thing is changing the mindset about, we really have to come out here, look in a way to help the client succeed. And then if our solution is right, the sale will happen if we do a good job of that. The next thing we have to do, it's the opposite of what people, of that in a way, is there are a lot of salespeople that are like, there's just so much noise out there. I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to and so there's this, I'm here if they need me. And this is where the mindset needs to shift from, I'm here if they call me, to I have an obligation, especially, and I'm going to go back to, if we're in a sluggish time, chances are that our clients are in a sluggish time. And if our solution helps our client get out of sluggish, it is our fiduciary responsibility to help them.
Yep.
And it is malpractice if we don't. So if we have a phenomenal solution that can impact our clients in a positive way, and we don't let them know about this solution in a way that's of value to them, it's malpractice. So we have the one way, which is I'm too pushy and I'm pitching too soon. We have the other way, which is I'm afraid to pitch, so I'm going to do nothing and I'm going to freeze. And then number 3, which is really going to come to bring all of this together, is you have to be able to, I'm going to say this way. Let's see if I can. It used to be, it's what you know, long time ago. And then it's who you know. And then maybe 15 years ago was who knows you. But now it's what value can you bring to the table? And you need actually all. You need to be really, really good at your craft. You need to be a thought leader, a subject matter expert. You need to be able to solve challenges. You need to have a good network of people that you know. You also need to have a good network of people that are familiar with you and your content and the value you bring. Right. And we absolutely at all, across the board, we need to be showing up in a way that earns the right for us to get those conversations. And anyway, I'm going on and on.
Yeah. And what I want to do is I want to lean into that a little bit more, because as a sales leader, I hope we have lots of sales leaders listening and watching. As a sales leader, what can you do? Like, okay, so we're talking about what salespeople can do, but as the sales leader, what can you do? And I think this is about the conversations. And Chris, jump in just a second here. What are the conversations you need to be having as relates to what we're talking about? So one is go through the next actions and all of the leads that are in there and say, okay, what value are we bringing here? What's your value proposition? Why should they buy this from us? What's in it for them? How will this make their world better? Who cares about it? How do we talk to them about it? Right. So just saying, oh, well, I got to follow up with him. And the sales leader going, great, follow up. No, you don't have time for I'm following up conversations. Those are, one, they're a waste of time anytime, but 2, right now, you have to have meaningful conversations about value proposition, bringing value, changing lives, changing businesses, not just reducing costs and saving time, but how does this truly impact you? How is this worth the investment right now? And how will it make your life better? And if your team can't have those conversations, that's a problem that you need to fix right now, because now is when you can have the greatest impact. Chris, you were going to say something.
No. I can't remember what I was going to say, but it was going to probably be something off of what Bren was talking about. And it just brought up a saying that my first sales leader back in 2002 used to say semi-regularly, which is shy salespeople have skinny kids. Right. And it's just more of like, you can't be sitting back and just waiting for things to happen. You actually have to take some level of action combined with your knowledge, and then mix in those portions of your network, those people that know you and those people that know who you are, and really build out your plan. Not doing that is what I would consider malfeasance. So
I love that. Can I just add, sales leaders need to start rethinking the KPIs.
Yes.
They are so broken.
Yes.
They are measuring the wrong things and they're encouraging the wrong behavior.
And Bryn, let's jump into that when we get to our third segment, because that is really going to be powerful in that conversation. Welcome, Daryl. Daryl has just joined us. Renee, you were going to jump in. What were you about to say?
I was just going to offer a suggestion, strong suggestion, but a suggestion for making sure that those conversations have value, right? Versus the ones where you say it's kind of a waste of time. We're past that point. I challenge sales leaders to work with their sales teams to ban the words checking in.
Yes.
Right?
Amen.
So if you do that, if you ban that from what you're sending or what you're saying, you automatically have to replace it with something more valuable.
Valuable.
And
I'm just checking in. I'm just following up. No.
yeah,
I want to jump back to something Bryn said earlier. So if I don't remember, there was Forrester, I think it's Forrester's numbers, where something like in a typically in a sales situation, used to take between like 5 and 8 contacts to reach a new buyer. Now we're up to like 17 or 18 or 20 to reach a new buyer. And here's the really interesting thing. It also means for those people who we already have relationships, it could take 5 or 6 attempts to get their attention again because they're so overwhelmed. What doesn't work is I'm just bumping this up to the top of your folder for the 17th time. Like if you didn't get their attention the first time, try something else, try something again. It is not my responsibility to respond to you. I owe you nothing. So if you want me to communicate with you, then share something with me that's of value.
Liz, can I add to that? This is what I'm super passionate about. I think you've heard me say this ad nauseum
Yeah.
on clients that we work with together, but I have a messaging golden rule, and it plays into what you're saying, right? Like minimum 8 to 12 frequency, but it's really important that it is across 3 to 5 different formats.
Right.
So this goes back to what you said in a few minutes ago when you were talking about how many emails do we all have in our inbox, right? And how much of it is going. Do not rely on one single channel for those 8 to 12. You're going to catch attention in different ways. You're going to resonate simply sometimes because you switch the format. So, you mentioned emails. Bryn mentioned LinkedIn. There's the old-fashioned phone. There's 3, right? You can keep adding different ways, and that will help you cut through clutter more than checking in, bumping this up, that sort of thing. So I'm just really passionate people understand not only the frequency, but the mix of format makes a big difference.
So, and even what you're sending, it doesn't always have to be about you. One of the campaigns we have with some of our salespeople that are trying to unghost people that they've had long conversations with that now don't respond is go into LinkedIn and see who do they follow, who are they engaging with. You can even search on LinkedIn of your first degree connections, all the people that follow Brene Brown, right? We can now go out and find and listen to a podcast that Brene's been on. And I go and say, hey, Daryl, it's been a while since we last talked, but I noticed you're a fan of Brene Brown. So am I. I recently heard her on a podcast and I thought of you. If you're interested, let me know. I'm happy to send you a link. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what he's following, what he likes, what he wants. We call it prospect by influencer. So
one of the things that I would jump in on here, guys, and say, building what Bryn is saying for sure, is a couple things. On the multi-touch, I mean, obviously I have a CRO at VanillaSoft, sales engagement platform. It's all multi-channel. One of the things people don't do is they don't leave even a voicemail anymore. But the voicemail is influence, exactly what Bryn was saying. They may not recall you back, but they hear your name. That's so brilliant spot there. On the actual try to get their attention, go and make your own content where you tag challenges that your prospects are having. I was talking to Bryn the other day, and she was sharing this challenge. What we've done at company ABC has done this. What have you guys done, right? So they're going to see you getting tagged. So creating content. What we used to do a lot of is we would actually go and do what's in it for them. They're not responding right now to our outreach because they don't have the budget. They don't want to take the risk. Okay, so what's in it for them? Well, what's in it for them is notoriety and career building and a win. Let's host a corporate webinar for a big ass account and invite them to be a panelist. I'm not talking about your prospective sale. Can you be a panelist on this? And by the way, when they're in the lobby, they're talking to you, and then you can say, how are things going? I haven't heard from you. There's so many ways you can do it. Influence is huge. But the last thing I'll say in this one is, and I see this over and over and over again, people forget about the buying committee. Yes, there may be one decision maker, but there's lots of people in that buying committee that influence the cycle. So if the primary person isn't responding to you, go to everybody else in the buying committee. Trust me, they'll talk behind the scenes. There's so many ways you can do it here. When I see this fail, it's because the sales rep has been lazy, as opposed to, and they just don't want to make the effort.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this first section, and Daryl, I'm going to reach out to you with a question here before we wrap up, which is it's Q4 scramble time. We started off and realized that I did a poll. 20% of the people I polled said that they're making a mad dash for Q4 and they're not sure they're going to make it. 80% said it's going to be really close. Nobody said they felt comfortable about hitting their numbers. So do you have any? We came up with a couple. I'm going to use this moment to reiterate them. You know, now's a great time for upselling. Now's a great time for getting people to restock or buy a few more of. Now's a great time to go back and look at those trade show leads that were really excited but didn't respond right away. Now's a great time to reach out to the other stakeholders. And pipeline triage. Now's a great time to really dig into that pipeline, figure out what's going on and what's possible. Any other last thoughts for us on this topic, Daryl? How are we going to make Q4 if we haven't gotten there already? And before you start, I'm going to tell you our next one is going to be what shouldn't you do, or what are bad decisions. So any thoughts, any last hope we have to hit our Q4?
I'll be the contrarian here, folks. For Q4 at the start, what you should be doing is prepping your internal stakeholders at your organization for what is real and what is not, and creating advocacy in your behalf. If you're going to miss that number, don't shock them with it in December. Now, they shouldn't be shocked. They should be watching all the reports, talking to RevOps. They should be aware. But it's amazing how many people are clueless until it's the moment of panic and they're being asked by the board, are you going to make it? And then they come to you and you say no, and they're not the bad guy. You're the bad guy. Set their expectations now. Have them create a plan with you. So you're doing it together. So if you miss the number, at least you took early steps and they can see you had good intent. So contrarian point of view.
I'm going to add to that, though, as long as we're having internal conversations, this is going to be really close, guys. I need legal. I need accounting. I need everybody on my side right now, because when I say go, you got to be ready to go. We don't have any time for fooling around. So getting that buy-in from the whole team, getting the buy-in from the whole team to be there for the sales that we are able to close is really important. There's no time for stalling. And we're all, I have to share why we're all making smiling faces right now. Chris just shared with us a local billboard for a dry cleaner that said tailored Swift, which is hysterical. I love that.
And I have a blog post that's going out in 2 days, or Monday, 3 days. That is, it's tailored Swift for sales. So it's, when Daryl was talking about what's in it for them, this is sales, what's in it for them. So it's tailored, and so it's around how do you personalize, and sales, what's in it for them. So look for my tailored Swift.
Yeah, so now's a good time to do things that are attention getting. So all right, we are going to wrap up this section on its Q4. What can we do? What are the last ditch efforts to hit our numbers? And we're going to end here, but in our next segment, we're going to talk about what are the big mistakes that companies make and why did they make them? So join us here for our next episode. And thanks for joining us for this episode of Sales SOS Podcast. All right, you guys ready? Okay, welcome to the Sales SOS Podcast. This is Liz Hyman, and we have your Sales SOS crew here. We have Bryn Tillman and Chris Bowen, and Renee, who stepped out for a moment, Renee Bigelow, and Daryl Pearl. There's Renee. And we are going to talk about what do companies do when they start getting desperate. It's Q4. We're desperate. We have to hit these numbers. What are the mistakes that they make, or what are the decisions they make that seem like good decisions, but maybe they're not good decisions, or maybe they're short-term decisions, but they're not long-term decisions. So I know, Chris, you had some you wanted to share, so I'm going to let you start this segment. What are the mistakes?
I mean, there's obviously lots of things that you can do wrong, right? I think one of the bigger ones is thinking that you're going to discount your way to hitting your number, right? And wait. I'm not saying there aren't times when that can happen.
Say why that's not a good idea, Chris.
Well,
it's obvious to us, but why is that not a good idea?
Well, you set the expectation that this is what your price really is, right? but you're also not understanding your client's business. Like there's a reason why these things are delayed. It's typically not going to be budgets what the delay is. It's something in their business cycle. It's something in the uncertainty, as we were talking about in the previous episode. There's something else going on. You need to understand what's causing your deal to be essentially either below the line or maybe straddling that line between what's going to get funded and what's not. And if you can understand that, then you can position yourself to be in a better position. Doesn't mean that maybe then you don't discount some, because maybe it really is a legitimate budget concern. You can figure out a way. Maybe they go for a longer term contract. There's lots of different levers that you can push there in order to try to pull that thing in and make sure that both sides are getting something. I think if you give a discount without anything else, I always think that's bad practice, right? Your sales leaders should not be looking for saying, let's just discount right up front and nothing else coming back on our side, whether that's referenceability, whether that is other types of terms that you want to put in there.
I'll add to that. I do think it's important, though, to try and pump up the team, right? Like it's tough on the team. So incentivizing instead of discounting, like incentivizing your team and doing more team building kind of I'm blanking on a word right here. Sorry about that. But the idea of like keeping everybody pumped while they have this pressure on them to close fourth quarter, right? It can be fun little weekly sessions. It can be incentives. It can be whatever that makes it a little more fun during a high pressure time, I think is really, really important. I know I'm always bringing in a culture aspect to this, but I think it's really, Bren put gamification in the chat. Exactly. Like add something to it to take some of this heavy pressure off.
Well, if you're gonna have a spiff, like if you're gonna have a spiff, make sure that it's something that people look at and say it might be challenging, but it's doable. Right. The thing that will demoralize your team is, we're going to have a spiff, but really we're not expecting to pay any of that out. Right. Because we think it's nearly impossible. It's like nobody's going to get motivated by that. Get something in there that's going to really, it drives what you want them talking about, but also drives the behavior that you're looking for. And
meaningful too. Right. Yeah. Like don't dangle something that's like a baby carrot.
Right.
Right? Like,
well, you could say for each of these little things that happen, you get a little thing.
Yeah.
So
not a big thing in a baby carrot. Exactly. Yeah. Like
I want to go back though.
It's actually fun.
Yeah. Right.
I got 5.
Okay, wait 1 second. I want to go back to discounting and talk a little bit about why this is problematic. One is I had a client years ago that said hospitals always wait until the end of the year to get their year-end discounts. And I said, no, hospitals wait for your year end to get their year end discount. Yes. You have trained them to get the year end discount. Now, the other thing is you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? I give you discount to get this closed now when I could have made $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, $100,000 more if I had waited till January. So we're making the investors happy, but they're going to be unhappy next year because we started the year by stealing, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Anyway. All right, go, Daryl. Give us 5.
All right. So things people will do in Q4 that they shouldn't do. Okay, here we go. Number 1, management just being on the reps to dial more, dial. And you see with that is you should instead be going deep on your current opportunities, because even if you dial and even if you uncover that 1% that might have interest, the chances of them closing in the next 3 months from a complete cold call, highly unlikely. So you're actually losing opportunity. Number 2, calling non-marketing qualified leads like event attendees who picked up your tchotchke on the hope and the prayer that they're going to suddenly become a multi-million-dollar deal. It's a waste of time. Number 3, I had discounting as well, but from a different point of view. Throwing out the discount hard, but you haven't actually qualified the pain and the consequences of no decision. So if they haven't bought in on the consequences, it doesn't mean your lower price is going to change behavior. That's number 1. Further, though, if you do discount, you're left with the same problem of likely still missing your number, because you had an original number that was this big, you discounted it by 25%, you still have to make up that 25% because that was in the original forecast to get you across the finish line. So either way, it's not working for you. Number 4, getting a verbal yes from your champion, but actually not pursuing the paperwork. And then you go and tell management that you've got this deal, and then they chase you for the next 3 months to say, where's the paperwork? And then ultimately it falls through. Follow the process. And number 5, management starting to more and more take control and micromanage because they're panicking, which disincentivizes the reps. And ultimately what causes that to happen is they miss this number and then they leave you and you're screwed for the next quarter and beyond. That's what I see over and over again.
Mic drop. That was brilliant. That was brilliant. So yeah, these are the problem is they all sound like in the moment, they sound like the right, let's do something. Let's dial. Let's keep dialing. And if you even just start doing the math, if you do 100 dials and you get one conversation, the chances of that one conversation turning into a closed deal, unless you have a super short sales cycle, if you have a 1 or 2 or 3 day sales cycle or a week-long sales cycle, dial like crazy. Keep dialing. But if you've got a business to business complex sale with a long sales cycle, dialing's not going to help. And I totally agree with the trade show. Most of the things that come out of trade shows are trash. But what about all those people that weren't trash, that actually had conversations with you and were interested, but they weren't interested in that moment? So you put them in the bottom of the heap and forgot about them. Go back to those that had meaningful conversations.
Especially those people you already have a business relationship with, that you had a conversation with at a trade show. It just happened to be at the beginning of the year and you really have it, you kind of set it down because you were chasing new business, right? Like those kind of scenarios. I'll add one more to Daryl's list that I think sometimes gets undercounted or underweighted. And that is really, if you're going to micromanage, be the best defensive blocker for your salespeople that you can. And that is like, I mean, and I guess I feel this one acutely because I spend a lot of fourth quarter in a lot of strategic meetings for the next year, right? Like, what are we planning? What are we doing? We're really planning for things that we know are problems and we're working on those things. Don't trap the people who can make the cash register ring right now in a lot of those meetings. Be very choosy about their time and how you commit them to things when you need them to be closing in fourth quarter. And it's a delicate balance because sometimes you really need their input, but you have to be the best defensive blocker for that.
Yeah. So you need to do strategy. Strategy is important. You don't want to wait till the beginning of the month of the year to do your strategies. So when do you do it? And my feeling is like the very, very beginning of Q4, the first week of October is a great time to do training because you have the whole, or to do the planning. But don't wait. Don't wait until, you're end of November and early December and they're really scrambling.
More importantly, like to make sure you space it out, that you aren't waiting too much on like your top seller, right? That you aren't trapping them too much, like really kind of having a good global overview of that.
What other mistakes? I want to share, actually, before I ask for other mistakes, we talked about going in and then dropping a big discount. And I want to give some examples of how these things backfire. So a sales rep that I was working with was working on a multi-million-dollar deal. And it was with one of the big enterprise companies. And they had worked, it was a highly technical deal. They had worked on the pricing, got it all set up. Everything was going, but it wasn't going to close until the following quarter. And they needed the numbers for this quarter. And he had a really young, excitable sales manager who probably, I don't know. Anyway, he got this idea to call this sales rep's contact and say, hey, we'll give you a 25% discount if you close it right now. And that head of technology, that CTO said, oh, I was told that I had the best price we could possibly get. Now I need to go back to my board and start this conversation over. So he just undermined his salesperson's credibility, undermined his company's credibility, and he pushed back the sale. Don't assume that you know more than your sales reps and that you're going to get in there and somehow make something happen that your sales reps can't. I've got another head of sales, hang 1 second, Brent, that constantly would jump in when he got anxious and close his salespeople's deals. So They never really learn to close them, totally undermine their credibility. Like if you want your salespeople successful, don't undermine them, especially in these urgent crisis times. Go ahead, Bren.
Yeah, when we talk about giving a discount, it's about us making a sale, not us solving a problem.
Right.
And they know this, right? And to your point, it feels so inauthentic. They are never ever going to trust you moving forward in whatever you say around pricing. So, the bottom line is, we can do more for you. We can offer additional things, or we share an ROI of why, if you do it this quarter and we get started now, it will make a bigger impact. But the moment we make it about price when they have not asked is the moment it's very clear it's about me making a commission and me hitting my numbers, not about me solving your problem.
And let me jump in.
Sorry, Daryl. Go ahead. As a buyer, we're not stupid. I've bought so much software in my time frame. It's scary because we talk to each other, whether it's online, on social, and communities like Pavilion and others. We all know what each other got as a price. So we know what your bottom line is. And we also know exactly the point that was made earlier, that if it's your end of quarter, which is, I use your end of quarter thing, the vendor's end of quarter thing all the time to get a better price. And they would always threaten me. A rep, don't do this. Don't threaten, say this is a one day only price. If you went there once, you will go there again. And I know that. The only time that ever backfired on me, and I actually escalated from the rep to the VP, and both came back and said, no, that was an offer, a month ago, not now. And I said, okay. And I went on LinkedIn and I found out who the chief revenue officer was, connected with him, said, I'm a prospective buyer.
Oh no, we just lost
the cliffhanger.
Say it again.
Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay. So what happened was when the rep and his boss, the vice president, turned me down and said that price was last month, I went on LinkedIn, I found the chief revenue officer, I connected with him saying I might be a prospective buyer. He connected quickly, and then I messaged him and said, I'm ready to sign today at this price that your team gave me last month, and neither my rep nor your VP will do this. I'm guessing if you're like me, you need every dollar on your end of quarter. And in that case, they got back to me in 20 minutes, and they were on a trade show floor speaking, and they said, give me 5 minutes. He came back 5 minutes later, and he said, the price is yours if you can sign today. That's the thing. Buyers aren't dumb. So stop thinking they are. Stop playing the games, because when you play those games, all you're doing is pushing us away and make us want to go buy from the competition, especially when two products are both relatively capable, and it's whoever gives the best customer service combined with the best price.
There was a thing I believe, actually I'm 98% certain, in Todd Capone's in the transparency cell, when he was talking about, here are the things that are important to our company, right? So not trying to hide it as, hey, I'm caring about you. These are the things that are important to us. They were the length of the deal, the timing of the deal, the components that were included, and one other factor, right? These are the things that we understand that are important to you, right? And they may not be those exact same things. And saying, this is where we believe that the negotiation really has to take place. And if we're going to give in one area, we've got to make it up in some of these others that are important to us. But we are willing to do that. So, I think sometimes having that type of conversation, if you know those things, can help. The other part that you have to really be careful of, especially as you're moving, if you're in a more senior position like a CRO or something along those lines, is when you're discounting. Well, now what does that do from a bottom line perspective? Because a lot of times we get really, really focused on the top line from a seller's perspective. But what's that doing from a bottom line perspective? And now are you going to be in more challenging conversations with your board or with your CFO because of the amount of discounting or something along those lines if you get too carried away with it? So you have to really pay attention to those things.
So the one other thing that I want to touch on, you guys, is investors. And we talk about investors a lot. We don't have Mike here. He's watching his son swim in a swim meet. I think it's USC in Hawaii. Anyway,
Tough life.
tough life. The investors start getting anxious. Like, we've got to get our numbers up for the investors. We've got to get our number up for the board. And so we're going to do whatever it takes to hit the number. And if you're if you're on the stock exchange, of course, not hitting your Q4 number is, can really impact the price of stock. So there's this investor factor. How do you deal with that? I mean, I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I'm throwing it out there because I know that some of the company folks that are listening to me, some of the CEOs, some of the COOs, they're going, yeah, but our investors are like, I don't care what it takes, hit your number.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is you have to be able to understand what number, right? Because different people are going to be looking at different things, right? So if they're looking at your top line, only the revenue number, are they looking at what you're pulling through from a profitability or margin perspective? Are they looking at those numbers? Are they looking at what your expense trends are? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into those overall evaluations. I think you have to be able to understand what they're looking for. And to be honest, you need to be able to have real conversations with them around what it's going to take in order to get to what their expectations are. I'm not saying those conversations are comfortable, because most of the time they're not, but you need to be able to have that type of conversation with them.
I'll add on that, Chris. I think it's really important, and oftentimes your marketing team can help with this piece of it. It's really important to understand the market too, right? Like, what are some things that are happening in the market? Are there acquisitions going on, mergers and acquisitions going on? Are budgets being cut across the board with some of your biggest customers? Like, is this a temporary thing? Is this a cycle? Is it cyclical? Is it a trend you see ongoing? Like, you really need to be able to explain the numbers behind the numbers, especially if you see it as a blip, right? Like Bryn mentioned earlier, that a lot of people are kind of waiting to see results of elections or some other things happening in the war that kind of just have them indecisive, but they feel like, but there's a feeling that they will make a decision because they're going to have to. They're just kind of waiting to get a little bit more information. So if you feel like there's something like that that's kind of holding things up, you need to have that story. And marketing teams are often very helpful at getting research, at accumulating and analyzing the market for you to have that story for as a sales leader to match to what you're seeing and getting empirically from your sales reps as well.
In my experience, the big thing to think about with investors, and I see this fail often, is a couple things. When you have founder mode and the founder is promising literally everything to the investors because they don't know how to manage the investors, eventually the day comes when they have to face reality and say, that number I told you we're going to make back in January, we're not going to make it because I overpromised and I couldn't deliver. So the CEO and the revenue leaders, head of sales, head of marketing, need to have a very honest, transparent relationship with the investors. If it's just top line, then they need to understand, and that means likely your net recurring revenue is going to suck in subsequent years because you're going to have so much attrition. Are they okay with that? If you're public, they're not going to be okay with that. If it's margin, then we can maybe do some belt tightening and cost reductions to increase the margin, even though we're not going to hit the top line number, and they may be okay with that. But part of it is truly to have that ongoing conversation. What I see happen too often is the CEO wants to own that relationship, shuts everybody else out, makes promises to keep the pressure off of them, pushes down hard on their own team, which then results in high churn in the actual staffing because nobody can handle that pressure. And ultimately, the CEO gets fired. That's why the executive leadership, the head of sales, the head of marketing, need to have their own relationships with those investors, those board members, not just the CEO. So sometimes you have those back channel conversations to manage expectations. But that's the reality. And I'll flip it around. Investors need to do the same thing. Investors cannot have happy ears and just listen to what the CEO is telling them. Investors need to proactively initiate those relationships and build them with the head of sales and the head of marketing and the head of customer service. Huge impact on that NRR number. So if you don't have that at the top, then it's dysfunctional from the get-go. And I would say don't take the job offer when it comes. Run as far as you can go.
And I think this is huge because founders and investors are in this constant battle, right? So if you have venture capital and they're really looking at 2 to 3 years, 5 years, flipping it, what what can we do? And they've got their eye on certain numbers because that's how they're measuring their success. As a founder, you need to understand that. And I think this is a whole nother conversation I have often. What does that investment mean? And how do you manage that relationship? Because the expectations are high because they're giving you money because they want a return on investment. And so this is a struggle. But it doesn't necessarily mean the right thing to do is to, have a trunk sale and sell everything in your trunk so you got nothing left.
Everything. That's the answer.
And move it all. Okay. So unless there's any last comments, shall we wrap up this segment and talk about, so we're going to wrap up this episode on what mistakes that companies make during Q4 when they're scrambling to hit those numbers. And we're going to dive into our next episode in a minute and talk about what you can do to not end up in that situation where you're having that Q4 scramble. So thanks for joining us for the Sales SOS podcast. We'll see you in our next episode. Okay, you guys ready? Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Chris Bowen, Bigelow, and Daryl Prell. And right now it's Q4. We're in Q4 already. And what we've just in the last 2 episodes talked about that it's kind of late to be worried about whether or not you're going to hit your numbers for the year. So we're going to spend this episode really talking about what can you do to starting in advance to hit your numbers for next year, because planning for next year and hitting next year's Q4 numbers starts, in my mind, it starts at least in Q4 of the year before. So we're your Sales SOS podcast crew, and we are here to help you solve your sales problems. Let's dig into this, you guys. When, how do we not get in this situation that we're at Q4 and it looks like we're not going to hit our numbers? Go ahead, Bryn.
Well, how we don't get into this situation is we have to actively be prospecting. Now, that can look like a lot of different things, but what happens with a lot of salespeople is I've got a big pipeline, I work my pipeline, and then once that pipeline dries up, I'm all the way down here, and then I have to start over again. And we need a consistent stream of opportunities. The way that we teach this, the way that we do this is through warm market referrals. Once we have a good solid group of clients that love us, and by the way, usually there's 5 or 6 or 7 people inside of each client that we can tap into, we need to, on a consistent basis, get referrals or at least permission to name drop so that we have a solid pipeline of referrals that we have conversations with over and over again. The other thing that we have to do is to have consistent content that's going out. Of course, I'm going to say this on LinkedIn, but we need to stay top of mind. I'm going to share a Daryl Prell story that I don't know that he knows, but Daryl was a huge prospect for me at VanillaSoft, and it never really happened. But I had sent him a proposal in SmartLinks. The week he started at AgoraPost, he looked at my SmartLink, and I reached back out to him in his first week. I didn't even see that he had switched jobs yet, but he had looked at my old VanillaSoft proposal and then connected me with the person. And then in a week, I closed AgoraPulse. So I'm just sharing, right? If I did not stay top of mind, if I did not consistently share content and Daryl wasn't out like looking for my SmartLink. He probably saw content and went, oh yeah, Bryn and LinkedIn and maybe, right? And then went and found that old proposal. And then right, all of that happened because of consistent value in the marketplace.
I'd like to build on what Bryn said about referrals. It's really, if you haven't had, like I get into, when I start working with a lot of clients, I find that there's not a process for gathering and sharing referrals.
Wait. I have to stop you there. I have to stop you there for 1 second. So research shows that like 75% of happy buyers will provide a referral, and only 4% of those have ever been asked for one.
Yes. That's what I was saying. It's a very common sin, right? And so one of the easiest wins that I find is finding ways to get customers with potential customers and customers with customers to juice that, right? So sometimes I have clients and we do office hours where we have people come in if it needs to be virtual because it's a global base or something like that, right? But I've also, when I have clients who have a local base somewhere where they can go to one market or in their own home market, have an event, invite customers, very happy customers, customers with potential for upsell and prospects, and make sure that they're part of that content, right? Let them talk. As much as we want to push for that sale, especially in fourth quarter, and this is something I'm doing with one of my clients right now, we're making sure that we're having this event where the business is pivoting to add new services, right? So we're making sure that they know that we're adding the new services, but we aren't going to preach to them. We're going to have the customers come in and share tips with each other, and then we'll be part of the mix. We know that will juice referrals and get people talking about, oh, they used the customer for this service. I didn't even know they did that. I'd really like to talk to you about that, right? Getting them to talk to each other. And of course, we'll record what they're saying. We'll turn it into content. We'll ask for permission to share quotes. Like this will get that sort of juiced. So whatever way you can figure out, it might be at a trade show, asking customers to come hang out with you at the booth so that they're available to talk to other people when they walk up, whatever it is that you can do that fits with your brand to get customers involved in this really kind of juices and greases those wheels.
I think one of the areas, so I think referrals are obviously great and gold and should be used. One area I think, depending on what you sell and who you sell to and things along those lines, is looking at, do you have partners that you can go to market with that may have more credibility in certain spaces than you do? And if you have those partners, leverage that network as well. I mean, they're partners with you for a reason. And then being able to then go in and you raise your level of credibility when you're in that co-selling type of motion. You just need to have real clear boundaries around where that line is between what you're doing there and what they're doing there.
Absolutely. And I was 100%, I agree with that. I was remiss in not saying partners are a big piece of that. The way I explain it is it's about creating a community of people who are aligned on the purpose, right? And who get the same values. And when that happens, everybody helps lift each other up.
Absolutely.
So I want to go to planning for a minute. I'm going to put on my strategy hat.
That's my first bullet. You're taking it again every time. I want to object. Go ahead. Go for it.
I'm going to put on my strategy hat for a minute and talk about what does it mean to create a strategy to hit next year, and what are the KPIs and how do you track to make that happen? So Bryn brought up KPIs in the last episode. So the first thing is, pulling a number out of thin air is not a strategy. Can I get an amen on that?
Amen.
That is not a strategy. We need to increase sales 10% over last year. Go. That's not a strategy. There's nothing strategic about that. It's arbitrary. I call it wagging your sales force. You made a wild ass guess. You're just going to make your sales force do it. So the first thing is be strategic. Pick numbers that are strategic and understand the resources that are required to hit that number. You are going to be surprised if you do not allocate the resources necessary to hit the number. So the first thing is to really figure out, who are we selling to? What are we selling? Which products we're selling to whom? How much do we need to sell to hit our number? How many leads do we need to get? How many people have to hit the west to do that? How many conversations do we have to have? And I know everybody's screaming and yelling now, sales is not a sales number. It's not a numbers game. It's all about quality. Well, you have to have quality conversations and you have to have enough of them to hit your number. So the first thing is figure out what it's going to take to hit the number. What are the resources? Figure out your strategy to get there, who's doing what, and then manage it along the way. So what I hear so often in funnel reviews, oh, we do our quarterly, weekly funnel reviews. I'm with them all the time doing funnel reviews. What do you do in your funnel review? Oh, what's closing this week, this month, this quarter? What's closing this week, this month, this quarter? Guess what's going to happen at the end of Q4? all you ever looked at was week, this month, this quarter, you have to know of your funnel, and you have to keep track of what's flowing through at what rate. Because if you're not tracking that the whole year, you're always going to be scrambling to hit your quarterly and yearly numbers. That's my rant, you guys.
Okay. Building on that wonderful rant, I got a whole bunch of more additional rants. I'm going to repeat some of what you guys already said here. Number one, I said was revisit your funnel math, performance, and assumptions at each stage, and challenge one another on how to improve them for the next fiscal year. What are the roadblocks? How can you expedite issues, make them more efficient, streamline the process, etc. So exactly what you just said, which was number two, and this is two because these often in as a RevOps team, is revamp your systems. It could be as simple as the form and how long it is on your website, for example, to remove roadblocks, increase your velocity of your sales cycle so you can get more deals done in the same amount of time with the same resources. So you don't have to spend more money and your margins increase. Number three, people talk about this all the time. I actually rarely see this done. It's going to blow your mind here.
Ready?
Survey customers and the ones you lost to understand why they did or didn't pick you, what they would need to remain a loyal customer and not churn, and why they chose the competition or why they choose not to go to the competition. And then, crazy thought here, adjust your products or services roadmap to leverage this newfound knowledge. So classic case in point, when I was at Agorapulse, we were always being asked why we weren't getting a higher deal size. And they would look at the competition and say, oh, you lost to the competition and they get a higher deal size. Well, yeah, because you know what? They had CRM integration and we didn't. And it's hard to get an enterprise deal and an enterprise price point without CRM integration. Sounds really simple. That's the idea of doing this interview things, and you adjust your product roadmap accordingly, which we did, by the way. You guys already hit referrals. That's fantastic. The other thing I said here was repeating what we said in previous episodes, meet with the investors and the board members to understand what they're going to be prioritizing in the next fiscal and factor that into your own plans. Another one here, then, building upon what was just said, build out the related OKRs and the KPIs to support attainment of those OKRs for the next fiscal year. And actually, this is crazy, and actually make sure you follow the whole OKR process as opposed to just putting them on a spreadsheet and then scrambling on the last day of the quarter to get it caught up so you can be ready in time for the meeting where you all just bullshit and say you did it and you know you didn't. So there we go. That's editorial by Daryl, free of charge.
Any thoughts, you guys?
Wow, that's compelling thoughts.
I mean,
So-
it's very powerful, and those are really, really important. And I think the bottom line is we have to be conscious of what we're doing. We can't just keep spinning the same wheel and going in that same direction without stopping and taking a look and really deciding what I'm going to go back. You guys, it's a long time ago. Do you remember? This is my first job at Dun & Bradstreet. I would have a meeting with my manager and we would do stop, start, and continue. What are all the things that you've been doing that we need to stop doing because they're not working? What are all the things that you haven't been doing that we think will be good that we should start doing? And what's really working? Continue doing those. And I think just taking that perspective can make all the difference in the world.
Love that.
I want to go back to this idea of KPIs, and I want to go back to this idea of looking at the funnel. These two things. The first is many of the companies that I work with, they don't start tracking their leads in the funnel until they're putting together a proposal, which means that my belief about my sales cycle is very wrong. And in most cases, when I start actually tracking the top of the funnel, they'll find that their sales cycle is not the 3 months they think it is, but it's actually 9 to 12 months in first conversation. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that you have to start trying. The thing that you have to get people really comfortable with is if you're tracking things from that early stage, you have to and should expect a fair amount of churn. Right? You're going to have things that fall out of that early stage. That's where you want them to fall out. You want, by the time you get to that proposal stage, that you've got a better than 50-50 chance of winning that business, right? Because you should have a better understanding. You should have clear, hopefully been able to influence what they think is important, why it's important to them, what it's going to mean to their business, and then being able to drive that forward. If you're only waiting until you get to that point, you're missing all of the other conversations that have had to take place. You don't have probably a really realistic view of a map of that account and who has power to make this decision, who has the power to say no, right? And being able to understand that dynamic is really, really important, especially as you're moving into more complex and larger deal cycles.
And if I'm not tracking the top of the funnel, if I'm starting midway through, I really have no idea how I'm positioned for 9 to 12 months from now.
Right. I think there's also a fair amount of that stuff that you may have stuff that hits your top of the funnel, and maybe it's not a no, but it's a no right now. Maybe that's somebody that in a year, they're back at the top of the funnel and they're ready to move. So maybe they're 9 to 12 months from a year from now, but because you had them there, hey, I need to go revisit, right?
So as we're looking at KPIs, top of the funnel KPIs are important. I'm less concerned about how many phone calls you make than I am about how many new leads you put in the top of the funnel, how many of them moved into qualify, and how many then moved into solutions. So when we're setting KPIs, so many companies are doing things like, you need to do 50 dials a day. Well, if you're a BDR and all you do is dial, then you have to have your daily dials. But if you're a sales rep who's doing a whole bunch of different work, then how you get those deals in the top of the funnel are not as important as that they're there. Did they come from a referral? Did they come from a download on the website? Did they come from you finding a new deal in an existing client? Is it somebody you used to know? Whatever it is, get them in the top of the funnel and measure it. But if you are wondering why you never know if you're going to hit your quota a year from now, it's because you're not tracking a year watching. And again, if you have a really short sales cycle, you won't know, but you probably are nurturing people online way before you ever start having conversations. What else? Go ahead, Renee.
I'll add one that I run into fairly often, and that is particularly, I would say, more in the startup world, where things are kind of new. Yes, we always want to see that up and to the right? And with the startup, you're growing, so you expect to see that. So, but one of the things I often see is is neglecting to include any cycle, any buying cycle in your forecasting, right? So everybody knows fourth quarter in retail, right? But I've had I remember having a congenial but continual argument with a CEO about business isn't cyclical, right? And I'm like, it may not be, but the people inside it are, right? Like, you're going to have a dip in the summer because of vacations. You're going to have some dips for things around the holidays. It might be new leads you have a big dip on for around the holidays, but you can close a lot in that week between Christmas and New Year's. But you have to understand what some of these cyclical things are that are going to happen. If your customers have a cyclical routine and rhythm, then you're going to, even if your business you think is immune to it, right? So really, it's a common thing I see, particularly with newer management or a younger company, right? It's just kind of evenly spreading things because we're expecting to see steady growth without really thinking through what that cyclical pattern how it could affect your numbers and your KPIs, right? And so if you're going to have a little bit of a soft, the one I see pretty regularly is like end of second quarter, beginning of third quarter in B2B. Like, it just gets a little soft because of all those vacations. If you know that's going to happen, then you got to pad on the times where you have a little bit better opportunity to close because the people are around, right? So like that even spread is one that I find bites people a lot.
I was just waiting. I thought maybe Daryl had something to dive into here.
No, I nail it.
So KPIs or OKRs, we need to really think about what are the numbers that matter. What do we need to be tracking? So again, I will always harp on looking at the entire funnel. I I always look at things like, what is your next conversation going to be? If your salespeople can't tell you throughout the year, the course of the year, what their next conversations with the deals, the people in the deals that are higher up in the funnel, they're not working them. And you know what happens? That's when stuff falls out of the funnel, because I look at it and go, I don't remember who that was, which I personally have done more times than I'd like to admit, right? I don't even remember that person. I don't remember that conversation. I have no idea where we left things or what I'm supposed to do next. So the best I can do is call and say, I'm just following up, which is going to go nowhere. So, you know, if you're looking at KPIs, it may seem like a silly KPI, but do you have next actions on every single deal in the funnel? Because if you don't, you're losing stuff just because you've forgotten about it.
Oh, I love that. I mean, building what you said, this is for the sales audience out there. Understand this. When management gives you KPIs, it's you know, and you like bitch and moan because you have them. And then you have to scramble to update the CRM so they can actually report on those KPIs. And your answer is, this takes me away from selling. I don't have time for this. You have got it backwards. Those KPIs, exactly as what was just said, are there for you. So you help you understand what you need to do to hit your quota so we can pay you a boatload of money in commissions. This is a team. This is not about management against the reps. This is, I mean, and really it comes down to, you know, what the best advice I can give you here is, it's all about attitude. Talk about KPIs. It's attitude as well, right? It's understanding that we want you to be successful, and you just have to, you know, let us help you where we can. Now, I understand there's a number of sales leaders out there who have the ability, the tact and delivery of a bull looking at a red blanket, okay? But, you know, that's a whole different conversation.
I'll add to that because this is when I encounter a lot, and this is kind of fits in culture, but it also fits in, like, there's a lot that we are asking salespeople to do beyond sales because they're part of a company, right? And like a lot of really great salespeople, and especially in industries where I've been involved where it's 100% commission, right? They view it as their own little business, right? Their list is their business, but they are a part of a company. Right. And there are things that there are great benefits to being a part of a company, literal benefits, right? That, you know, things that you get by being part of a company. Maybe you have a better product to sell than if you started your own business, right? Whatever it is, you're a part of a company for a reason. You get benefits to it. You have to contribute to the team too. And sometimes contributing to the team is helping with the knowledge and expertise and data that you can help contribute so that the team can make better decisions, so the company can operate better, right? So it's not just, if I go sell, I make my numbers and I'm an individual entrepreneur, right? Like it's both and, right? And to that point, I think I really like also seeing a behavioral, Liz, you kind of talked about this when you talked about having a KPI for next actions. Those are behavioral KPIs. So whenever you're trying to achieve and like change management, I mean, I hate the term, but whatever change you're trying to get in your sales department, if you have a new CRM, if you have a new pipeline flow or process, if you have a new way leads are coming in, or you're asking BDRs to do something different, whatever that is, having a good KPI around the behavioral change gives you something to kind of celebrate as a team. I think is really important too, because we're asking them to hit numbers, but we're also asking them to do things. And those behavioral KPIs can make a big difference in the number of KPIs.
I think the KPIs are important. And I think that when you measure stupid KPIs, excuse me, I guess that's not fair. You get your sales team irritated. One of my clients, we had a long talk about the fact that somebody in the company decided that a meeting didn't count as a meeting unless it was 40 minutes long. What has that got to do with your client? Has nothing to do with your client or the conversations your client needs to be having. Now, if you've got clients that are strategic partners and you want to say they're strategic partners, we need to somehow be having 4 meetings a year with them. You need to make them valuable. Great. But to put a KPI around how many minutes a meeting is silly. So are we measuring the right things? You guys have heard me tell the story before. This young woman who was exceeding quota, outselling everybody on her team, and in trouble every week because she didn't make enough outbound dials.
Yep. I've had where a touch doesn't count unless there's a conversation. Really? I bet you Bryn and LinkedIn would say a touch still counts. If you're making outreach and you have a conversation, it's not. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I think that like you said, a 40-minute conversation. I mean, how many of us have been in meetings or calls that were scheduled for an hour, but could have been finished in 20 minutes, right? That call should finish in 20 minutes. That was the appropriate time for that call.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to complain if you let them off early, right? Like if you're finished 40 minutes early, people will find a way to allocate at least a portion of that time. I'm not going to say that it's a perfect reallocation of that time to profitable activity, but they'll find a way to make it more valuable than sitting on 40 additional minutes of a call that needed to end 40 minutes ago.
So if I can just throw out, I think one of the most important things we can do is set an agenda and ask the agenda, right? So here are the things I'm hoping to accomplish on this call. What are you hoping to get? So at the end of this call, we know we covered all our points. When those points are covered, you're done. And I can't tell you how many people I'll say, okay, I'm going to give you 20 minutes back in your life. They're like, this is amazing. They love, and I make sure that they know how much time they're getting back, because that's a plus. And if I'm on a coaching call and we hit a place and there's 20 minutes left and they bought an hour or whatever that is, I will say, let's stop here and we'll schedule another 20 minutes in 3 or 4 days. I want you to implement this and then we'll come back. So they feel like I'm not taking away their time, but I am not going to waste this time. We are where we need to be. We accomplished what we needed to accomplish. And let's regroup again with that 20 minutes when you need it. So yeah.
What should we be measuring, you guys? What are the KPIs or OKRs that matter?
First conversations with the right people. That is the number one thing as a sales leader that we need to look at. How many first conversations are we having with the right people? If we don't have first conversations, no other KPI matters in the whole world. And if we make 120 calls a day and there are no first conversations, who cares?
Right.
Who cares that we made that many? If we have 17% open rate in email, but there are no conversations, who cares? So all I wanted, how did you get a conversation with the right person? And by the way, it doesn't have to be a sales conversation. It could be an interview for a blog post. It could, the very first rapport building conversation. Maybe it's a networking conversation that might become a sales conversation. Maybe it's an insights call. I will have a call with someone around helping them with a challenge. And then they'll say, oh, well, how can I work with you? And I'll say that I appreciate you asking that. Let's set up another call. I don't want to bait and switch them because I said that this was an insights call. I also want enough time to talk about it. I don't want it to be an afterthought. And at the end of that, they're like, wow, that was really about me and bringing value to me. So that to me, that was not a discovery call, but it was a call with the right person, building rapport and bringing value. I think that is the most important KPI.
Okay, what's the second most important?
I'm torn.
Yeah, go.
Go ahead.
What are the ones you're working on?
So I'm torn. One of it is how many people in the account have you talked to? So because there's always, we talk about, how many touches there are, but the buying committee is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't think the buying committee is the right word anymore. The people who are influencing the decision, it's just gotten massive. But the reality is, when you talk to those people, they also give you incredible insights on the needs and the politicking and the decision-making process and the features and the functionalities and the influencers and the decision makers that you often don't get from one person, which reps rely on over and over again. So I want to know I want to track how many people in the account you've talked to ongoing and what you've learned from it. The second thing I want to track is I want to track the average duration it takes to have the next conversation. So if a conversation, according to Bryn, is number one, which I'd agree with, I want to know how long is the next conversation, because we talked about it already. And what we see is so many reps don't do that next conversation, or they wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 3 months because they're distracted or they suck at a follow-up. And that's when accounts go cold. So to Bryn's point, if she hadn't kept on top of me in that VanillaSoft Agorapulse story, then she might not have got the deal, but she did. And ironically, she got the deal at the next company, right? So it's that whole frequency of touch. And there's lots of ways. You don't have to have a phone conversation every part of the deal. It can be email. It can be social media outreach. It can be, an interview for a piece of content. Because even then, informal conversation takes place where you learn stuff. It's all about moving the ball forward. If I don't see any movement forward, then you're going backwards.
As I've talked about before, I mean, sometimes it's a text message, right? And if you're at that point in the relationship where you're able to do that, like that's an easy way to get quick answers to hopefully things that are meaningful to both of y'all.
And I don't know if I have a KPI to measure this one exactly, but I do think it's really important to be looking at removing junk from the funnel, right? So, the CEO looks at it and goes, everybody's funnel's full. Why isn't anything closing? You're like, and I'm like, because there is nothing in that funnel that is going to close. It's just junk. And so if you have stuff sitting in Qualify and it's sitting in there for 9 months, it's not real. So how much, what percentage of the funnel is real? And I don't know how you measure that in a KPI, but it's definitely part of the conversations that you're having. We shouldn't be afraid to eliminate the stuff that's not going to move forward or move it to someplace else, to a nurture list or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that has to happen in your sales manager, sales rep calls, right? Like they need to be having those conversations to really understand what's real and what's not. It's real easy to plug all sorts of stuff into the CRM, but if you're running the right metrics, running the right reports, and looking at that stuff and having conversations about those deals, what is it going to be to get to the next step, knowing when that's going to happen, who it's going to happen with, who has to be included, who from our side needs to be included in that conversation, if there's other people, technical people, what have you, that helps start to get people forcing to think around those things and kill the stuff that's not real, because a bloated pipeline doesn't do
anything.
What you may think it does.
Okay, so let's wrap up. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to add because I think fourth quarter is when we're looking at and setting a lot of things for next year, and I think this one is pretty critical. That is one of the top. When you say what is the top KPI that you need to have, I mean, I think a lot of the ones that you all named are almost evergreen, right? Like those are just should always be there, and a lot of people don't have them, so they're really important for them to know them. But I also think it's really important to look at what's happened this year. As Daryl said, if you are surveying customers, if you're surveying employees, if you're looking at your own data, and you uncover where your blocks are, where your friction is in your sales process now in your customer journey, figuring out what the most important thing that you could fix next year, that you could really zero everybody in on, and setting a KPI for that. It's kind of a marriage of that numbers and behavior, right? Like, what is the thing that we need to do that will fix? Like, is it having conversations? Is it getting people to come to calls? Is it getting enough people in the cover? Whatever that one thing is, I think that generally is one thing that needs to be on your KPIs for next year, so that it gets addressed.
Okay, so we need to wrap up this segment on what do I do now to make sure that next Q4 I'm not scrambling to hit my numbers. Are there any last thoughts on this topic before we go to our next episode? All right. So I hope all of you hit your Q4 numbers. We are rooting for you. That wraps up this episode of Sales SOS Podcast. Okay, so now we're going to talk about spooky, creepy salespeople. So are you guys ready to jump into the next one?
I have no experience with spooky creepy people at all.
From the Department of Redundancy Department.
That was good. I like that one.
I actually have 13 that are going in my post, so I can run through 13 fast.
I did this post several years ago, and I haven't revived it. Maybe it's time to revive it. All right, you ready? Hi, I'm Liz Hyman, and this is your Sales SOS podcast. I'm here with your Sales SOS podcast crew: Bryn Tillman,
Hi,
Chris Bowen, Daryl Prell, And Renee Bigelow.
Hi.
And today, because it's Halloween is just around the corner, I thought we'd have a little bit of fun. And I wanted to talk about what are the spooky things that salespeople do. And Bryn said, let's talk about the creepy things that salespeople do. So regardless of if they're spooky or creepy, let's talk about the things that really give salespeople a bad name, give the whole industry a bad name. We are your Sales SOS podcast crew, and we are here to help you increase sales. So, all right, you guys, dig in, have fun. What are the things? Bryn's going to start us off because she's got.
I'm just going to list without explanation 13 things. Overly personal questions, persistent follow-ups with no point, invasive and inappropriate compliments. Something like, really impressed by your background, and right. Pressure tactics, and we go back to what we were talking about before, like, you know, if one close it today, right? Guilt tripping, fake enthusiasm, name dropping without permission, using scare tactics, ignoring boundaries, excessive flattery. So not just one time, but like over and over. It can, especially as a woman, it could get very creepy. LinkedIn connect and pitch, bait and switch, ghost and post.
Those I love that. I love that. Let's dig into some of these. What add to the list, or let's dig into some of these. What are your thoughts on creepy salespeople behavior?
I will add one. And this one's maybe a little bit of a special one for me, because we have tracking on lead generation and things like that. We often can see people's behavior on our site when they clicked on emails, when they've viewed different things. Do not say, I saw you were on our pricing page, right? I saw that you visited our website yesterday at 4:04 and 30 seconds p.m., right?
And it's now 4:04 and 31 seconds a.m.
Yeah. So
I
like,
see you have
people that you are
moderate
stalking
buying
intentionally is pretty creepy, and they will hang up or abandon you right away. There are much better ways to do that.
Yeah, I had a call that said, I see you have moderate buying interest. That's what their CRM told them about my activity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That goes from creepy to just not too bright.
I just said not anymore.
Later.
I'm cured.
Yeah.
What else have you got?
I mean, you guys are going to rock. I mean, I don't, how do I put this carefully? I strongly suspect that the women are going to have way more of these than we men are. That's my gut feeling. I didn't have 13. I had a handful. I had nonstop views of my profile. You know, once or twice I get it. After a while, that's just creepy. Wanting to text me outside of office hours, and then the conversations go everything except related to the actual deal we're talking about. That was just not good. Bryn hit this one. I had it as well. Sucking. I called it sucking up. I think Bryn, you might have said lots of flattery, but I called it just outright blatant suck up.
I'm going to change it to that. Thank you.
Cliche messages and frameworks that are the flavor du jour on use this format and this wording, and you'll get a 25% response rate. And they think they're being original when I get it. That's not so much creepy as it is just annoying and disingenuous. I would like to say nonstop flirting, but unfortunately that doesn't happen for me, but I suspect it does with others. So there you go.
I will say from a buyer point of view, hitting my personal cell phone without permission, whether it's a phone or a text.
Yes.
Like if you're going to or my Facebook or my Instagram or something like that, that is very clearly, if you look at a social media account, it's very clearly just me and my kids or something like that. Like, and I'm not talking or posting about work, like not the right channel. It's
Right.
going to tell me I don't want to do business with you if you can't respect the boundary from the very first time I interact with you, right before I buy the sale. If you can't respect a boundary, what the hell's going to happen? Oops, sorry. What the heck's going to happen after we start doing business together? I was the one today.
So
You know-
I will tell you,
Okay.
even my cell phone is my cell phone. It's my personal and my business. If somebody texts me and they don't have permission, I block them.
Mm.
Good for
They
you.
don't have permission. You can reach out to me in a number of ways, but you do not have permission to text me.
So
I do
this-
the same as Renee. Like for me, Facebook is friends and family. I keep that one, right?
Mhm.
LinkedIn, Twitter, Threads, Instagram. I'll talk to anybody. You know, I'm whatever. But when you're all over me in the Facebook, and then you say to me, "Why haven't you accepted my friend request?" I'm like, "Go away, dude. Like you can see, there's nobody else in the industry there." So yeah, I
That's
agree.
Well, I think the other thing is if you're heading down the stream of personalization and you act as if you have a particular interest and you don't, and it shows like really, really fast. So it's like, so you saw something, you decided you were going to latch onto that, but you don't know anything about it. And so now I'm like, okay, you have no credibility in my eyes. And it may have had nothing to do with your product, what you were selling, or anything else. It's just now I'm like, I can't trust this person. So
I have two things. So the first one is cultural. So it's not a blame. I just want this to be a re-education for anyone who's selling to women in the US. Don't start with hi dear.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's,
So
it's
that,
scary. You have to say that. Just putting that out there.
yeah. And I'm sure that Renee and Liz have both felt this numerous times. I can't imagine that they haven't. The other thing, and this is actively happening now, and if he happens to be listening, maybe he'll get the point. But I had a vendor who disappointed. Let's just say that. It was through Facebook. It was for personal whatever, right? So I disconnected from him as a friend, and now publicly, I put a picture of my grandbabies up. And he'll write, "Hey, Bryn, I sent you a connection request. Somehow we got disconnected. Please accept." In the comments of a picture of my grandbabies, which makes me, I just hide it. I just hide it so no one else sees it because it's so inappropriate. And I don't even want to give anyone visibility into him. But 3 times now this has happened on my content. Do I block him? Maybe. I don't know. But the bottom line is that is so inappropriate to do that. It makes me want to connect way less. Okay, that's all off my back.
And I think that AI is creepy sometimes. So we're now using AI to and Bryn mentioned this earlier. So AI is going to go on and look at my website and then or my LinkedIn profile, and then it's going to create a message. Hi, Liz. I'm so impressed with the way you take the chaos out of sales. And I really would be honored to meet you. And these are AI generated and they're just creepy. They're just creepy. So if your AI is generating your content, look at it, or connection requests, look at it really closely and make sure it isn't creepy. To me, that's just creepy. And like, by the way, I know what my website says. You don't need to tell me. I'll tell you another one I think is really creepy is when you act as though because you sent me a message, I have some responsibility to respond to you. Hi, I've sent you 3 messages now and you haven't responded. I mean, I actually have done that. I did that with a prospect recently. I'm like, and it is a different kind of situation. It isn't just cold. And I was like, hey, you guys, I've called you 5 times. Can somebody respond? And they did. And we were like, so sorry, Liz, we meant to talk to you. But this idea that because you wrote to me, I have some responsibility to you, and you're going to, this guilting that Bryn talked about earlier, you're going to try and make me feel guilty because I haven't responded to your 75th email. Like,
Well,
I'll respond with him when I want.
I'll add to that one, and I'll probably speak up for a lot of marketing people in this one because marketing people are the target for a lot of salespeople, right? Because we buy a lot of things, a lot of tech, things like that. The scare tactic that usually goes with that is the creepiest to me is, are you going to respond to me? If not, I'll have to call your boss or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
And I will tell you, at least in the organizations I've been a part of or where I have clients, that's never like if they've hired me already and I walk down the hall and say, heads up, you're probably going to hear from some creep who's saying this. Just wanted you to know like why I'm blowing them off or whatever. Like it's very rarely are you going to win that argument if they've hired whoever, right? Like, that one to me is just like, it's like threatening, right? Like it's
well, or when you make threatening, I'm going to take you off my list is a threat. Okay, you can stop emailing me.
Let me help you. Unsubscribe. Done.
That is being taught. Literally, a sales training company teaches, I haven't heard back from you, and I've sent 3 emails and 2 voicemails. Please let me know if you're no longer interested because I can destroy your file.
Have a party.
That
there is that you're not responding already. So if you get pissed off and don't respond, no harm, no foul. You've not cost me anything. And if it works and you do respond, then it's a win. That's their logic. What they don't understand is that you, in fact, 9 times out of 10, call the company out, not just the rep. And you and your colleagues no longer want to do business with them. It's so short-sighted. It's so transactional, but they're oblivious to it. It pisses me off.
I also hate when they act like they know me. Hi, Liz. Like they'll put it in. It's like, I don't know you. Do I know you? Okay, can I tell you something else I think is creepy that I've been getting lately is, hi, Liz, I helped Jennifer increase her sales by 30% by doing whatever. And then I'm like, who's Jennifer?
Yep.
Like, am I supposed to know who Jennifer is? And what does that got to do with me?
Usually I'll respond to those ones.
Such a rare name. You would think.
What is the name that was the most named female or male 20 years ago so that I can assume that, or 30 years ago, so I can assume it's somebody that might be in their network and just use that name.
Tiffany, Ashley, Amber from 30 years ago.
There you go. And just put that in there. And then they'll assume that it could be one of 4 or 5 people and you're trying to figure out which one.
Insane.
Bryn, I'm curious. You had Ghost and Post as one of yours.
What is
that? That's a big one. So Ghost and Post is a couple of things, right? Number one, I put out content. I never re-engage with the people that are engaging. So people put in a comment and I don't go back and comment. And on average, there should be double the comments of your commenters because you should be commenting on everyone's comment. I know I said comment a lot, but I mean it. The other thing is the Ghost and Post in that we put it out there and hope and pray that people show up. We need to invite people to engage on our content. And so, the only way we're going to get people to our content initially is, number one, engaging on their content. LinkedIn will reward you. The more you engage on other people's content, the more they'll see your content. So that's number one. So you have to be active. You can't just post and think that people are going to show up when I'm not showing up for them, right? So that's really important. And when you put out content and there's zero activity, and then you put out more content with zero activity, when people get there, it's a ghost town. They go, oh, they have 17 articles, 1 like, 2 comments, 3 reactions, and like that's worse than no content at all. Okay,
I think I'm a spooky ghost and poster.
Sorry, Liz.
Has anybody ever called up the sales rep's boss and say, I just got to share this experience I have with your rep?
I haven't called them, but once or twice I've gotten an email so egregious that I've forwarded it and just said, you've got to sequence an automation, or like I try to be as gracious as possible and just say, you've got a sequence or an automation or something that's gone haywire here.
I
Right.
did it recently.
I had a
Jill.
one-on-one experience. So and actually Liz was with me at this event, but there was someone who spoke from the stage who I thought was fabulous. And actually there were two people, both that had C-suite groups, and I was interested in joining one. So I reached out to both of them. They signed, the first one sent me a calendar invite while I was still at the event to schedule a time with their sales rep. I came home, I had a conversation with the sales rep, and they did everything we talked about. They had scarcity, and I was like, let me think about this. I'm talking to another company. I want to compare them. But if you sign up today, we're going to give you this and sign up. And I just said I had another company to talk to. And he was so aggressive. And I had my note taker in the meeting. I sent my note taker to the CEO.
Nice.
See the whole video, and he came back and he's like, I am so sorry this was your experience. And by the way, I signed up with C-Suite Network at $1,000 a month. So my business went elsewhere. Just saying. So sharing that.
I actually had on LinkedIn 5 people from the same company connect with me in like 2 days that were all trying to sell me something. And so I found the CEO and wrote to the CEO and said, hey, maybe you guys should check like who's contacting who, because this is crazy. And his response was, oh, well, I'm so glad you contacted me. So are you going to buy from us?
Oh, shit.
I'm like, no, because you're annoying me. Tell them to stop connecting with me or I'm going to block them.
I don't even know why you connected with me yet.
So anyway, the scary thing about this is exactly what Bryn talked about, which is there are people out there telling salespeople to do these things, to be creepy, to be aggressive, to threaten, to manipulate. They're out there teaching it. And there's a guy, Bryn, you and I saw on the stage at Sales 3.0, who now is doing TikTok videos that go on to Facebook, and I watch the stuff that he does. And what's really fun is watching the comments about what he's doing, because he keeps showing up in my feed and the people are just like, this is gross. This is rude.
I wonder if it's the same company. I don't think it is though.
No, it was somebody who was doing sales training, and he's all over. I mean, he's TikToking like crazy, and he's TikToking out spooky, creepy, yucky stuff that we don't want salespeople doing. Yes, you can manipulate people into making a buying decision. You can do that. You can threaten some people into doing stuff. You can frighten some people. Is that who you want your customers to be? And is that the reputation you want your company to have? Because every one of those salespeople out there in the field is the reputation of your company. And I will never buy from somebody who treated me the way though he's suggesting you treat people. And I would never buy from a company. I was in one of those calls where I had somebody recently trying to sell me a virtual assistant. And he was like, if you don't buy it today, then the price doubles. I don't make decisions like that. I never make a decision in the moment. I had a car dealership do the same thing to me the other day. I'm like, I do not make decisions like that. I guarantee you, I will not make a decision today.
I had a car dealership do the same thing. And I was just like, you can use your scarcity tactics, but they're not going to work on me. That's not a trigger for me.
I had a car dealership call my husband.
Oh my God. So I had a car dealership do that to me recently, and I bought the same car for less money somewhere else. And then he emailed me and said, we still haven't sold this car. We're willing to negotiate. I'm like, well, you should have been willing to negotiate when I was willing to buy.
Well, I'd like to add on to the very, very good point that you made, Liz, about reputation. I can't, as a representative of brands, I can't go without saying this. It's more than just your reputation. It's more than just the impression that person leaves, like what we think of that person. It affects your brand, right? Reputation is a piece of that, right? But it affects your brand. Your brand is not a logo, an identity, a slogan, a saying. It is not those things. Those are pieces that we use, right? But your brand is a sum of the experience that people have with your brand. And often all of these examples that we just gave are the very first experience that someone is having with your brand. And if they're that bad, it's also the last experience that someone is having with your brand, right? So it is a much bigger problem. So when each of us have shared that we shared something back that was particularly egregious, we actually were showing love to that brand. Like there was something that made us feel like somebody needed to know that like this doesn't seem to match with what I think the impression of your company is with the experience I just had. Like, here's a flag for you to kind of see that, right? Like, it really is a big deal, and it goes beyond just sales. Like, some people, like you said with that training, will say like, oh, well, they just have a different sales philosophy. No, this impacts your brand. It's not just a sales philosophy, right? If you have somebody and you're like, oh, but they hit their numbers, okay, but it won't do you good in the long run, right? Like your brand will become being known for that because it is the first and often the last experience, if that's the type of experience that people have.
Well, and like we talked about in the last episode, part of your brand is that you discount at the end of every year. That becomes your brand if you discount at the end of every year. So all of these things about your company become your brand, and it does follow you. All right, you guys, any last thoughts on spooky, creepy salespeople?
Reps, if you know another rep who's spooky or creepy, tell them. Just tell them.
Reps, if you know another person who's spooky or creepy at a competitor, make sure you're doing the opposite because it's really easy to shine.
I love it.
Send them a link to this podcast.
Right.
All the same people they're calling on. You just look so much better. It's like this easy brand halo that you get.
Yeah, employ my C's: curiosity, creativity, compassion as you're having these conversations. Yeah. If your sales manager is telling you to do these things, you may be at the wrong company, or you may need to reach up to your sales leadership and say, hey, is this really what we want to be doing? Don't hang out at a company, because while they're damaging their reputation, they're also damaging yours if that's what they're telling you to do. So this is not good selling. This is not the stuff that builds brands and grows companies. This is the stuff that hits short-term goals, and we want to hit long-term goals and continue to grow and scale. Bryn, did you have one last comment? It looked like you had something to say.
Well, I'm just reading comments in the stream. I guess the one last thing is, if you show up authentically wanting to help resolve an issue that a client might have, you won't be creepy. But if you show up with the intent to make a sale, chances are creepy will seep out.
Bryn, what do you do if you're authentically creepy?
Try a different career. Or go into car sales.
There you go. I know some great car salespeople. So, all right, you guys, thanks for spending time with us today. We will see you at our next episode of Sales. The Sales SOS podcast. Thanks for joining us. Everybody have a great day and happy selling.